Republicans continue to protect Mr. Musk and his associate, Mr. Davis, and have not responded. In fact, changed the rule after they didn't show up. They changed the rule on resolutions of inquiry and suspended it till September. At which point, again, now hearing as we're continuing to call on accountability, the whistleblower steps forward and says that DOGE has been in there and taken the information and data and placed it in an insecure cloud. We want to hear publicly from these individuals. We want to hear publicly from the whistleblower. We want to hear publicly from Elon Musk and Steve Davis. And again, issued an inquiry of resolution. The Republicans then again voted it down until this March. Again, when it will sunset and be available again. This is no way to run a government. What are they hiding? Americans all across the board, every association affiliated with Social Security is demanding accountability. And Republicans continue to shield. Thank God for the press and Politico, who in combing through the documentation found out last Friday that in fact the administration has already admitted to what they said they weren't doing, what the current Social Security administrator said would never happen, that they have been giving information to private agencies. This is a crime. This needs the fullest investigation across all committee jurisdictions. So Ways and Means, House Administration, Judiciary, Oversight and Review, all should be involved in this. We are going to demand subpoenas and demand accountability. But frankly, they're going to probably try to pull the same thing again and say, no, resolution of inquiry is no longer a rule. But thankfully for an open and free press, we have the ability for the press to hold them accountable and ask the same questions we are. Why won't they come before the Ways and Means Committee or any committee of cognizance to answer these important questions? Every American ought to be concerned about the fact that they're combing over your personal data and information. A guy didn't make $500 billion through data collection for nothing. And the only thing he was salivating over is the $2.7 trillion of the people's money that has been put in trust in Social Security. We're here to assure the public we will protect that, get answers and accountability, and bring them to justice. With that, let me turn the floor over to Mr. Morelli.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Let me begin by thanking my good friends, Congressman Larson and the ranking member of the Ways and Means Committee, Mr. Neal, for the opportunity to stand with you today. Congressman Larson, I can't say enough about his leadership. No one has been a greater champion of Social Security recipients of the system than John Larson for many, many years. And his sounding the alarm about this, which he's been sounding for months, and he was right. This administration and, frankly, the lawless DOGE lackeys are abusing Americans' most sensitive information to violate Americans' most precious right, the right to vote, from which all other rights stem. And honestly, even knowing the facts today, it's hard to believe this is where we are. Our government signed an agreement to share Americans' highly sensitive private information with a MAGA-affiliated group. Let me say that again because it is so astonishing to think about. Our government signed an agreement to share Americans' highly sensitive private information with a MAGA political affiliated group, a group with the stated goal of overturning election results. And this wasn't some misguided attempt to secure elections. Let me quote directly from the Justice Department filing. This advocacy group's stated aim was to overturn election results in certain states, end quote. I mean, that should stop everyone cold. That's why I'm up here, and I don't have the great privilege of serving on the Ways Means Committee, sadly.
Right.
I'm an appropriator, but I am the ranking Democrat on the House Administration Committee, and our jurisdiction is federal elections. We are not going to, we cannot, we will not let this go unchallenged. We already knew that DOGE had little respect for the law. Now, thanks to the leadership of Congressman Larson and Ranking Member Neal and a courageous whistleblower, we know these abuses went even further and crossed directly into the realm of election interference. This isn't some far-off Beltway problem. This isn't a Washington problem. This affects real people where they are in their communities. Social Security data is how seniors receive benefits, how veterans are identified, how workers are tracked, and how voters are verified. That data in the wrong hands can be used to discount your vote. It can be used to challenge voters, purge voter rolls, and spread lies that undermine the confidence in our elections. But we should not be surprised by these actions because there's a clear pattern here, pattern we confront every day. President Trump has already tried to steal one election, and he's doing everything he can to undermine the integrity of the next one. This is the same administration that pressures states for voter rolls and sues states that refuse illegal demands. And this isn't partisan. This is not about Democrats or Republicans. It should concern every single American who values privacy, fairness, and ultimately the right to vote. We will not let this stand. House Democrats will continue to demand accountability, transparency, and strong protections for our elections and our democracy. We will demand that your vote counts, that you have free, fair access to the ballot, and that your ballot is going to count. It's the most American thing that we can do. And I want to, again, thank my dear friends, Congressman Larson and Ranking Member Neal, who I now have the distinct honor and privilege of bringing to the podium. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for your great work. And a word of applause to John Larson for his steadfastness against long odds. If you recall, the majority on the Ways and Means Committee, they were very dismissive of the inquiries that were offered by John Larson as he asked the questions that oversight obligations require of all of us. I think what's most dismaying, as Joe touched upon as well, is the following, that this information was retrieved for the purposes of electioneering. This is about your neighbors. This is about family members. This wasn't used because they wanted to improve the Social Security network. This was used for electioneering and how to overturn an election. Now, look, we all love to say, I hate to say I told you so, but we all really like to say I told you so. We told you so. And I hope that this inquiry that John referenced is going to continue. We certainly intend to refile as necessary. And I think the point that's important here for what media did with this was the following. This was not about something that came from the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. This was about a court filing from the Justice Department. That still means something, I anticipate and expect, in this city. When you look back at some of the quotes from the other side, as we began to raise these questions about a fundamental right of liberty because it's linked to privacy. When we raised these points, one member said Democrats are attempting to undermine the critical work that is being done by President Trump to root out waste, fraud, and abuse across the federal government. That is not the case, quote, with DOGE and the employees running it. Well, now the evidence points in a substantially different direction as it relates to what was suggested. All they have to do is bring in the whistleblowers, bring in the Justice Department, and bring in the Social Security Administration to have a full vetting of precisely what happened and why. In a court filing, a reminder, you don't get to say, well, maybe this happened or maybe that happened. That's information that is usually sought under oath from the respective parties. So in this instance here, I want to again thank John and certainly acknowledge Joe as well. But without John Larson staying at this, this would have been just brushed aside. We would not have talked about it again. But instead, consider that your Social Security number, whether it's on your credit card, it might be on your driver's license, this is protected information. And it was shared for the purpose of overturning an election? There are millions of Social Security recipients in America. I know, disagree sharply with what was done by DOGE and others, and we need to have a full accounting of precisely what happened and why.
Questions?
So as the Politico article notes, both the employees were referred for potential violations of the Hatch Act, and so accountability could be coming, but what safeguards and precautions and policies need to go into place to prevent this from happening again?
We've already introduced legislation, which our colleagues refuse to take up, that says very specifically that no DOGE person or any person should have access to the personal data and information of the more than 300 million Americans that are on Social Security. That has been a sacred trust. Again, let me commend Michelle for the courage that she showed, having been appointed by Donald Trump, but knowing the law and knowing the sacred trust in terms of people's personal information, said, I will resign before I would allow DOGE in there. And then Mr. Buzzignano, actually the person, Mr. Dudek, that replaced her, was already reprimanded for having shared information. So the fact that our curiosity was more than piqued at this point in terms of what is the reason that Elon Musk and his associates were focused on Social Security. You know, and he was honest, Musk, when he said, well, you know, if you look at the agencies and where the money is, 70% of the government's budget is comprised of 3 agencies: Defense, Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. Only one has $2.7 trillion of the people's money in trust.
You know, how about vetting employees? How's that as a consideration? How about asking those appropriate questions when some of what DOGE was doing was being celebrated in places? I mean, there were all these highlights, they had nicknames. All of a sudden, you're finding out that individuals had no knowledge of the basic tenets of Social Security are in this position to review your Social Security records. That's the reason we have the problem we have, and we would not have discovered this without the court filings.
Exactly. Can I just make another observation as well, which is, if Joe Biden had tried to use Social Security data to advance the interests of progressive groups, the MAGA world would have literally lost their minds. It would be on 24 hours a day on Fox News. There would be calls for his impeachment. There would be all kinds of investigations. I mean, they would literally lose their mind. And how members of Congress, how members of the House aren't outraged by this and aren't doing everything they can to support the inquiries being asked for by Mr. Larson and Mr. Neal and others is beyond me. But this really goes to the heart of some fundamental issues, as Richie said, of liberty and freedom in this country. It is astonishing the breadth and the depth of this, and that people would do this, and House Republicans wouldn't be rushing to do everything they could to investigate this.
Yeah, they were in a great deal of rush to make sure you knew about Hillary Clinton's emails, and a big rush to make sure that you knew what was on Hunter Biden's laptop. But when it comes to the people, all 435 members have Social Security recipients in their district. All of their data and information has been violated. And they have given access to outside sources, as Mr. Neal said, who have never been vetted and were allowed to go through this. The Supreme Court needs to revisit its decision as well, especially with the courts coming out demonstrating what the lawsuit was all about, that DOGE was going into personal data and information. Good. Thank you.
Good. Thanks so much.
Thanks. That was great. Nicely done, Joe.
Very good, Judge. Thanks.